Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. Access to Democracy is back. We've had a slight delay here in getting this show started. One of the things that we've discussed is how to keep jackets from lumping up in the back so that they look improper, as though your head is being pushed forward. And this is very serious stuff. Anyway, we're joined today by Senator Jim Carlson, who has been our most frequent legislative guest. And normally, and I have a whole list of things to talk about, but we're going to talk about the furor over the Senate office building, and we may not get beyond that today because there has been so much disinformation and absolute falsehoods about the Senate office building. You've seen it in commercials, you've seen it in ads, you've heard about it, you've seen stories about it, about how the Senate is spending $93 million for a luxury office building that is not needed. Now, the fact of the matter is that, and one of the things I should add is though it's the Democrats who are doing it, First question I want to ask you, Jim, are Republican senators going to be allowed to use this building?
Absolutely. No, firstly, I need to correct you. I am calling it the Legislative Office Building, primarily because it provides space for the legislature, both the House and the Senate. And
one would
yes,
never know that from the advertising.
You wouldn't know that. And you wouldn't know that the original committee that was formed to work on the design of this building was appointed by the Republican Senate and House. And the Senate, let's say the bipartisan committee, had 3 Republicans on it, Senator Hann, Senator Fischbach, and Senator Limmer. They worked on the design as much as anyone else did. So this is a bipartisan office building. And yes, all the senators will be going there. It's part of the restoration of the Capitol project to try to get senators so that they can be in one location. And there's other requirements that we have that are related to that restoration. For instance, and let me give you a little bit of a timing on it. Right now, if you go up to the Capitol, very little of it is open. It's probably the amount that's open is the amount that's going to be open during the 2015 session. The House chamber is open, the Senate chamber is open, and there are there's senator offices kind of sprinkled around the building and jammed into just every location, every closet even. That's going to stay the same until the end of the 2015 session, at which time the Capitol will be closed. No one will be able to go in. It will, other than contractors.
Now, what was the necessity of this building? And you've already put to rest one of the falsehoods that the Democrats are building this building, because it really was, and I know that also, a bipartisan effort. As a matter of fact, in choosing an architect, there were several bids, and one was the most expensive. Who was that individual suggested by?
Well, it was a matter of there were confidential bids because the initiative was to have the contractors bid proposal, design, build. And they did this without each other knowing all of the details of the bid. And that was, all of those were tossed out at one time. But the final bid was scored by the people on the committee, and this was on the Architectural Selection Committee, of which the present contractor also was on it. The present contractor happened to be the one with the most expensive bid, and the Republican that was on the committee, Matt Dean, was the one that selected this as his highest priority contractor. So yeah, this is not something that's partisan. It involved both parties just as deeply as the other. Now, there's been lots of attempts to make campaign issues out of it, and that's why it's being called the governor's opulent building. The governor isn't going to be in it. The governor had nothing to do, really nothing to do even with the design of it. But the governor...
Design or selection.
The design or the selection of the architect, correct. This is a building that is needed both temporarily and permanently. Temporarily because the Capitol is undergoing all of its renovation, and the Senate and House chambers are going to be closed for the 2016 session. There's no place to have that session, and constitutionally we have that session. Well, so there was an effort to look at other locations, and even prior to this, the infamous Joe Souchere column, the Pioneer Press had been offered a 2-year contract to move into their building
To have the Senate
move temporarily into their building, and they turned it down. Then Joe Souchere wrote this column and said, why aren't they coming to the Pioneer Press building or the Macy's building and all the other kinds of buildings downtown?
But it was his bosses that turned it down, or
Yes.
whoever is running the Pioneer
Yes,
Press.
it was, yes. Now, and then following that, and the reason for worrying, or let's say the concern about it, is that, again, the Capitol is going to be closed, so we need temporary space. The Legislative Office Building was the lowest cost option to house the legislature and still be able to get the things into the Capitol complex that we needed, namely 3 larger hearing rooms. Today, we have hearing rooms that are always packed. I was at a hearing on Tuesday, I believe it was, Tuesday, and I had to stand. I was in a packed hearing room. This was an ethics committee hearing. I had to stand, and I could stand there as long as I could, but I do have back pain, so I eventually left. That's what happens every day up there, is that people either have to stand in the room or they have to be outside looking at TV monitors.
Well, let's face it, how old is the Capitol?
A little over 100. It's about 110 years ago that they opened.
And that's why refurbishing is necessary on the inside and the outside.
Yes, yes. And there's another incident that happened, or let's say an event that happened in, I believe it was in the early 70s or late 60s, early 70s, and that was the open meeting law. When we talk about your government, people say you don't want to do it behind closed doors, you don't want to do it in smoke-filled rooms. We passed the open meeting law that requires all votes to be held in the open. That immediately required conference rooms, hearing rooms. And people are getting involved more and more in their legislature, and these hearing rooms are packed. So we needed larger hearing rooms, and 3 rooms in that new Legislative Office Building are going to be those hearing rooms. 2 of them are going to be used for the 2016 session.
And Republicans are going to be allowed in there also.
Of course, yes. Yes, and also there were a lot of ADA compliant things that had to happen with the parking. This building, for the first time, will allow covered parking for the disabled. This is a problem up at the Capitol, and it has been a problem for years, that disabled people had to park outside. They had to, trudge through snow or go through in their wheelchairs through snow, and you know darn well that that's not always safe, and sometimes it's not even possible. So this will be the first time that the ADA requirements will be met by the Capitol. And a little bit more about the building. This is a building that we wanted to have low maintenance, durable. Now, that durable isn't opulent. And it's like I said to you before, the Hoover Dam is durable. It's not opulent, it's durable. And that's what this building is like. It's durable, it's low maintenance, and it's 100% Minnesotan. And what that means is that the committee that helped do the design work and also selected the architect had that as a criteria, that the lighting, the stonework, the labor, the materials, and all of the things that could be sourced in Minnesota were either made in Minnesota or sourced from a Minnesota supplier, so that everything, and they're actually saying it's 100% Minnesota.
Well, what's bothered me is that people have used it in attack ads with just blatant falsehoods, because I have been following it pretty closely. As a matter of fact, there is a website where people can go to get the actual factual information, isn't there?
Yes, and you should have it on a graphic that you can put up. I put together a tiny URL so that you can copy it and go to it.
It's up on the screen right now, and we'll leave it there for a couple of minutes.
Yes, and that's where you can look at. Now, you won't hear all of the controversial details because, first of all, there aren't very many. People are making election issues out of nothing, out of thin air. There was a letter that was published in, I believe it was the Minneapolis paper, where one of the senators from the other side was concerned that some offices were being refurbished in the Capitol for some of the Democrats. And it's absolutely, totally false. And this person could have come to the weekly meetings and had her question answered. Now, instead, chose to make an election issue out of it and have it published in the paper. Now, those are the kinds of things that...
A member of the House?
No, this is a member of the Senate.
A member of the Senate,
Yes.
who should have known better.
Who should have known, who has access to all of those meetings, but instead chose to make it an issue. We hear like I mentioned, the talk about it being opulent. It's not opulent. It does have 67 senator offices in it, and that's how many senators we have in Minnesota, so everyone will be officed in that building.
Now, there was a lawsuit. There was a timeline here when it had to be finished by. I know that. And then there were a couple of delays and then a lawsuit. What's that mean in terms of dollars and cents to the state?
Well, that's another issue that has never been covered by the media. The original groundbreaking date was going to be February 28th. There was a lawsuit filed that held that off until late August, I believe it was, because they couldn't sell the bonds to finance the building until the courts made their decision.
Now, who started that lawsuit?
It was but what I'm saying here, and I'll stand on this, cost the state of Minnesota millions. Not only the cost to defend the lawsuit, but the increased costs due to inflation that you always have in a contract like this. If you can't break ground, then there's an automatic inflator that goes in for a contractor, plus the inability to move directly into that building from the Capitol. Now, I'm somewhat unique in that my office and the office of Scott Dibble are on the north corridor of the Capitol. We were not going to be moving our offices until the new building was ready for us to occupy. All the other senators in the entire Capitol have already moved to some other part of the Capitol, everyone except us. And what that means to us now is that at the end of the 2015 session, probably about the 1st of June, we have to move into temporary space until the end of 2015. We were going to be able to move in right after the session, move into the new building offices, but now they're not going to be ready because of the no block lawsuit.
Let's step back to the groundbreaking in February. And then we face a 7-month delay, and
Yes.
the groundbreaking takes place in August.
Yes.
Obviously, that increases costs,
Yes.
increases interest rates, it increases everything. So this
Yep.
this is a lawsuit.
And even the cost to defend from the lawsuit is that's a sunk cost now. That's gone.
That lawsuit was thrown out ultimately.
Yes.
Working its way through the courts.
That's right. The Supreme Court threw it out. And the next thing that you have to look at now is, where do we go? Today, at this moment, there is no facility for the senators as of June 2015.
So the state now has to go out and look to rent properties
Yes.
in St. Paul. Number one, the senators won't be together. Obviously, they're not going to find a space where they can put up 67 senators, including Republicans. And they're going to have all the additional costs of setting up, not only bringing over the furniture and the files, but the duplicating materials, setting up phones, setting up really everything from scratch.
Yeah, it's not as bad as having to move over there during the session. So we'll be moving into temporary space for the senators, staff, and materials. The telephones, the internet connections, all of that have to be refurbished into some office building. At this point, and because it's so short, it's between June and at this point it's December, there are very few commercial office spaces that will sign a short-term lease like that. Now the Senate, or let's say the administration, is going to have to refurbish the space. What it's going to be honest with you, will be just space. It'll probably have some cubicles in it. It'll probably have some shared spaces in it. It's not going to have the Republican senators because they can stay in the Senate office building and it's interim. So it's not something that's going to be real busy, but it is space that we have to have for the people that still have to work.
And that's additional money. That's
It's additional money. It's temporary space, and like I say, it's a short-term lease, which is going to cost the state a lot more than if we could have had the 2-year lease at the Pioneer Press. Now, at this point, downtown, well, let's say a week ago, downtown St. Paul there were 3 properties that they were negotiating on. Those 3 properties do not want to sign that short term, and I can't really say anything about who they are because we didn't want to make that cost go up by just knowing how desperate we are. But today I heard that one of the spaces, the newly considered spaces, is way over on Lexington and University. So that's about 2 miles away from the Capitol. This is just absurd that we are putting ourselves into that kind of situation because of partisan politics.
And let's say a normal day, the senators come in, well, you in particular, who was probably one of the hardest working senators, and look, I've gone by there at 9 o'clock at night, and I've seen your car still there. There aren't many cars there at that hour. And included in our graphics here is the fact that you do respond to every citizen call or email that you get.
Certainly
kind of unique in that regard. Even the crazies.
Yeah.
So, or maybe especially the crazies, I don't know. So, you're there first thing in the morning. Then you may have a committee meeting. You have to go 2-3 miles over to a meeting someplace. Then you have some constituents to meet. You have to go back to your office. Then there's a session in the afternoon. You have to go back to the Capitol or wherever the session is being held. Then you have to go back to your office to meet with your staff and your constituents and whatever. And then if you have work to do or research, you may have to go yet someplace else.
Yep.
Now tell me how that benefits the people of the state.
I think you've explained it. It doesn't benefit anyone, no one in the state. One of the biggest problems we have is finding your senator, finding your representative. I have to go to the index or the maps in the state office building to find our representatives that I'm going to go meet with. That's always a problem. It's something we can get over, but to look for your senator, you have to find out what party they belong to, what building they're in, and then what location they are. And that will be really easy once all the senators are in the same location. Now, we will be moving to that building, so it won't be as convenient for the senators, but I think we can live with that. Today, I have the most convenient office in the entire Capitol. Scott Dibble and I are right next to the 2 hearing rooms that are going to stay open during the next session. And we're only 1 floor away from the 3rd hearing room. There are only going to be 3 hearing rooms open for the 2015 session.
However, there's 65 other senators who are not going to have that convenience.
They have to
You
trudge.
just lucked out here.
Yes.
Maybe seniority had something to do with it or whatever, but
It was the luck of choosing my office.
or maybe it's the fact that your IQ is greater than most of them.
No, maybe it's my lucky pen or something. I don't know. But yes, the public is going to have trouble this coming session. They'll get used to it. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it is extremely inconvenient. And the people that go up there to visit, the people that go up there to participate in hearings and testify, they're the ones that will be lost in the whole shuffle.
It was very inconsiderate to start this lawsuit because who might be hurt the most are the lobbyists. And we know,
Oh, yes.
we know how important they are, particularly to the Republicans, the lobbyists.
I have to say something to defend lobbyists. They are important. They're the ones that study their issues the most. When I want to get good information, I'll go to a lobbyist. I'll find out from a lobbyist. They also have another job, and that's to try to get votes. And to get votes, they will often contribute to campaigns. And I don't accept lobbyist money. So I feel that I get the best from the lobbyists, but I don't have to owe the lobbyists anything. So, and many of them are friends and acquaintances, but I just don't want to have that interference of having to have a financial contribution so that they can get into my
You are
office.
somewhat unique in that regard, however.
Yeah, there's only a couple of senators that don't accept lobby money.
And I think that's important. We should also mention that you're here really in a nonpartisan way. You're not running this year. The
I
Senate
wouldn't call
is
that
not,
nonpartisan, but
well,
I'm anxious about the election. It's going to be very important. I'm working with our candidates locally and a couple of others. Because I'm a numbers guy, I'm going through a lot of analysis. And at this point, we know that the election is going to depend on turnout. There's no 2 ways to say it. And turnout for both sides. So the Republicans are looking for every way that they can possibly get turnout to come out and vote, and the Democrats are also. We go after different constituencies, but the issue is still the same. It's turnout. And I'm thinking
we're running all the constitutional offices this year
Yes,
also. The
yep.
governor, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the State Auditor. They're all running this year, which is very important in terms of the next 2 years,
Oh, sure.
the next 4 years, actually.
absolutely critical, yes. And I'm thinking that this year is going to be a little bit unique. And I don't want to tip off our opponents, but I think that because of the Republican candidates, the Republicans are going to have a turnout problem also, because there isn't a candidate that really gets people excited. There's nothing to excite the Republican people to come out.
I disagree with you there because some of the advertising that I have seen from some of these candidates really gets me excited. And it gets me excited because it's blatantly false. And I can't remember an election that was really quite as vicious as this one purports to be.
But see, that's cause and effect. The cause of all those negative ads work. If we would stop responding to negative ads, then they would stop running them. And the fact is that both sides are trying to get people excited, angry, whatever it is, to get them to go out and vote. That's the purpose of negative ads.
They don't tell what the candidate is all about.
No.
All they do is attack the other candidate. When I listen to a political ad, or I look at one, or I see it in the paper, I want to hear, what are you going to do for us? Not what terrible things did your opponent do 30 years ago, which may be relevant and may not, but the fact of the matter is, what are you going to do to make this well-functioning state a better one?
Yes.
And you know, that seems to be the intelligent way to proceed in an election.
But you know, that doesn't really work. What works is saying, my roses died, it's Obama's fault. You know, my car quit, it's Dayton's fault. That's the ads that work, and that's where we have to really study some of these ads. For instance, I don't know if you've seen the articles in the paper this morning that one of the parties used that Eric Dean in their advertisement. Eric Dean was the little boy that was killed by his stepmother.
That little 4-year-old
Yes.
who was killed, and it was used in an anti-Dayton ad.
Correct.
Despicable. And the family of that child, who happened to be Republicans, were hysterical and called upon the party to pull that ad. The party initially, through its state chairman, said no, but the pressure was so great that ultimately they are apparently going to pull that ad or doctor it.
And the important point about it is that they were blaming Dayton for signing a law to make it more difficult to prosecute child abusers. But that little boy was killed before that law was signed. So it had nothing to do with
And if
Governor
anything,
Dayton.
Dayton has spoken out really for stronger protection through social services of these children who
That's
are
right.
victims of abuse. And
Yeah, so we have to look at the details. We have to look and say, is Minnesota better than they were 2, 4, 6 years ago? And the answer is an absolute yes.
And
We
we can
have a
talk about
much
that.
better state.
Can we put up that website again if people want to find out the facts about the state office building? And thank you very much. In the little bit of time that we have left here, we have a great crew here.
Yes, yes, you do. They're doing very well. This time, it looks like we were able to get through a whole half hour without the recording stopping. Like it
And
did
yeah,
last
we
time.
had that problem last time. State-of-the-art equipment is not always state-of-the-art, but we really, really appreciate the fact that we are here with that equipment in the Thomson Reuters building, and everybody is so accommodating to us. And we've been talking with Senator Jim Carlson. Don't look for his name on the ballot this year because it's not there. But he'll be running in 2 years.
Yeah, I always
And-
tell people you can vote for me, it just won't count.
Okay. Access to democracy, obviously a one-horse pony today. Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Alan.